like to introduce my colleague Samantha now Becker. She just got married last week. I'm getting used to the new last name, who will be helping us present as we go. We always like to share our hashtag for the project. It's very important. I'm going to explain why in a little while, but this is an important way that we communicate with our community, which now is thousands of people around the world. So if you are tweeting, please add this tag to your tweets. As Sergio said, we have been talking about doing this project for a long time, and I want to acknowledge the partners that have made it possible. And at the top of the list, I'd like to acknowledge CSEV for their support. They provided a grant that made this research possible. The very first time that we've ever been able to do a focus on anything technical, really. All of our previous reports have been about education in general. We've looked at regions, as I'll explain in a minute, but also the support of UNED and of course IEEE. Without those partners, we simply couldn't have done this project, and I want to acknowledge their important contributions, not only to making it possible to do the research, but also as collaborators and participants in the work itself. We have been doing our research into emerging technology for more than 10 years, and so I've made this slide to kind of illustrate the growth of the project. It started off as an internal effort in our organization, an environmental scanning effort, just to help us stay up to date with what was happening with emerging technology. People began to notice it and ask us, well, would you publish this and share it? And so we published the first edition in 2004 of research that we had done the previous year. And since then, we've published 27 editions, and that number is going to grow to 29 in the next week as we publish, well, this one's released today, and then we have one for Ibero-America that's also coming out in the next week or so. The report has been translated 37 times into 10 languages, including Spanish, of course, but Portuguese, Catalan, German, Japanese, Chinese, and others. A little bit about the way the project is organized. We do 3 global reports each year that are called the Horizon Report. And one is aimed at higher education in general, worldwide. So we're looking at very high-level trends that pretty much all universities are looking at from an institutional perspective rather than a discipline perspective. We do the same thing for primary and secondary education with a report that comes out each summer. And then we are interested in informal education, art museums, science museums, that kind of thing. And we do a report in the fall that we actually are starting this week for museums. But in the last few years, we've begun to do a lot of work around the world looking at the uptake of technology in different countries. And so we've published now 4 reports for Australia. We published 4 reports for New Zealand. We published 2 reports for Latin America and Spain. We're publishing, those were all done in Spanish. The reports are done in Spanish from start to finish. All the research is done in Spanish. I think that's very important to create original research in Spanish. I'm sure most of you would agree, you know, that there needs to be that. So we're proud to be making our contributions as well. We're doing one right now for Brazil, which is being done in Portuguese, again, start to finish. We just finished one for Singapore. There are others planned for Asia. We've done it for UK, and we're launching a Central European project, hopefully in the coming year. Further out are others as well. But this is the first time that we have done a report that really looked at emerging technology from a discipline perspective. Even though STEM is a large category, and we added the plus because we included medicine. STEM normally doesn't include medicine, but more the pure sciences, but we included that as well in there. You can find out more about the project at this URL, nmc.org/horizon-project. The thing that makes the project unique, I think, is that all the work is done online. While the advisory board is global for this particular report, Sergio, could you pass around some of the copies. We actually have the report printed for you. And on the last page, you can see the experts that we consulted in doing the report, and they come from all over the world. Yeah, the report is really an electronic report, so that's why we just made Xerox copies for you. But online, it's full of links and examples, and the electronic copy, all of those links are live, and so it makes it much more useful. The notion behind the report is fairly simple. What we want to do, and it's the process that we use for all of the reports that we do, is to convene a group of experts. It's not an exhaustive group, and you could argue that, well, maybe some other people should be included, but it's a very open group. So we had 46 this year. The next time we do it, we'll replace about a third of those, and the group just continuously renews. Over the 10 years that we've been doing this, we've accumulated a community of over 500 experts worldwide that have been involved in our research. It's really quite a remarkable community, and we've added to it with this report. The people that work on the report never actually meet in person. All the work is done in a wiki, and this is the URL for that. And it's really quite remarkable because we spend, I guess we had 10 weeks start to finish from the time that we invited the advisory board until today, 10 weeks. Do the research, write the report, and publish it. So it's meant to be very timely, a very rapid process that we use, which I'll explain more about in a little bit. But all of our discussions take place in this wiki. It's a very structured sort of discussion, but also very open. It feels a little bit like the Wild West sometimes. But the idea is to get as diverse a set of ideas and opinions as possible, and then we reduce that set with a series of rankings and votings using the Delphi process. And so what ends up at the end of that is this report, which I'll detail a little bit more in a moment. Over the 10 years, we've accumulated a lot of information about emerging technology and its use in education. And we've captured all of that in an open database called Navigator. It's an open data model. It's an open source website built in Drupal and Solr, optimized for very quick searching and recovery, and we have thousands of educational technology projects from all over the world that you can find in there. That's on the web at that URL. Absolutely open, free, and I guess the watchword for the whole project is it's just transparent. We really try and not only share everything that we do, but also make it very visible to see how we've done it. Now, because people like to carry some of this information around and have it available, we also, about a year ago, released HZ News, which is an iPad and iPhone app that gives you up-to-the-moment access to Navigator. It's got a special front end for this. It also has a special feature. We follow about 700 publications around the world, and every day our research staff gets a list from we have this incredible news reader program that Samantha kind of manages with a team of people, and it spits out a list of 30 or so interesting articles or reports written around the world on emerging technology. We review those, and a small number, half a dozen, go into Navigator almost every day. At the end of each week, on Friday, we publish the top 10 articles from the week that we found out of all of that that we've done. And so you can get that with the HZ News app in the App Store at Apple. There is a charge for it, but the funds just go to help support the work. So it's completely not for profit. Now, as a little background as well, in January we marked our 10th anniversary, and so we invited 100 of the people that had served on our advisory boards to come to Texas, where I live. Sam just moved. She got married, right? And go figure. And 3 days we spent trying to really understand what had happened in the last decade of emerging technology and play that out to the next decade by identifying a set of meta trends. And we published that work in a special communique from it. And these are the top 5. We actually identified 30 meta trends, and then we ranked them. And it's an interesting set of the things we think are influencing our decisions worldwide have almost nothing to do with technology and everything to do with the way that we work and the way that we interact with each other. The world of work is increasingly global and collaborative. That affects every discipline, every field. You see that in multinational companies. Everyone that I've talked to since I've been here is engaged in projects all over Europe, in the States, in Asia. It's just a much smaller world than it ever has been before. And people expect to do their work wherever they are. And they want to learn wherever they are. And they want to play and socialize wherever they are, wherever they want to, on whatever device they want to do it on, which is pretty interesting. At the same time, the internet itself is changing in significant ways. Universities still have the luxury of gigabit networks and ultra-fast broadband, but for most of the world, the internet is a mobile network that you access over 3G or hopefully LTE or 4G, as depending on where you live. And for 85% of the world, that's how they access the internet, is via a mobile device over a cellular network. In that network, the technologies we use are increasingly cloud-based, and we don't care about the network, frankly, and we just want our apps. And then the final one I'll highlight, I recommend the report to you. You can find it on our website at nmc.org. But openness has moved really from being a trend, and I'm talking about openness in the broad sense. We'll talk about openness a little bit later in the context of MOOCs, but the broad sense is open content, open data, open resources, and even transparency, and easy access to data and information is no longer a trend, really. It's more of a value, particularly in academia, that people expect for data to be open. They expect for the network to be easy to access. And so that's just some context for the work that we've done in the last 10 weeks. And we're passing around Xerox copies of the report, but you can download it at this URL, go.nmc.org 2012 STEM. Now, in case you don't want to read it, here it is on one slide. And the main focus, of course, of our report, as this Wordle indicates, is learning. Learning was the number one. I mean, that's the reason we do the report. We want to understand the technologies, but we want to also understand their applications in learning and where are the efficiencies and the gains that can be done from looking at all of that. We do that a number of ways. We look at not only the mega trends that we've just talked about, but we look at specific trends that impact the exact place we're looking, whether it's a region or, in this case, the STEM disciplines and so forth. And we also look at challenges. We live in the real world, and we can't be Pollyannish about it. We have to make decisions in the context of reality. Money and other sorts of things are important factors, and the amount of time that we can devote to learning new things as well. So all of those are part of that. Our role as the researchers are to articulate the trends as well as we can understand them and the challenges. And then we track a list of, it goes up and down, but between 60 and 80 technologies, we're constantly tracking what they're doing. And that list changes from time to time. Some drop off, some combine, some become new. And our process is designed to help refresh that list of technologies that we look at. Essentially, what we do is we ask our experts, what do you think about these trends? What do you think about these challenges? What do you think about these new technologies? How can they be used in education? And then we ask them which are the most important over 3 horizons: 1 year, 2 to 3 years, and 4 to 5 years. And what we're looking for is which of these technologies are going to enter the mainstream. And when we think of that, for us, we use the Crossing the Chasm research, and we look at about 20% of institutions. Once something is adopted by that, we consider it as having entered the mainstream. These were the top-ranked trends for STEM education that are in the report. There are actually 10 that are highlighted in the report near the end. I'm showing them at the beginning in this discussion just because it seemed like good context. But teaching paradigms are shifting to include all sorts of online learning, and that's never more true than an institution like UNED, of course, which has been doing that for a long, long time. But we're talking about really every institution, even if they don't offer distance learning, is really looking at these paradigms. Massively open online courses are being talked about everywhere we go, all over the world, and Sam's going to spend a little time talking about those more in a little bit. But what's especially interesting is it's the STEM disciplines where most of the activity is happening in that. So it's a very exciting space. A MOOC was announced yesterday by CSEV in collaboration with UNED. It's very exciting. Our roles are changing, and that was very much a part of the conversation yesterday in the MOOC session. The notion of our students and clients having expectations of being able to do their work wherever they are, and new pedagogies coming involved, are very much a part of what's driving adoption of technology in STEM. At the same time, we can't ignore that economic pressures are playing a role, a very difficult role, and sometimes it limit what we're able to do. At the same time, even as we have less money, there's more expectation that we meet the needs for digital media literacy. Digital media literacy is important in every field, more and more. And if you look at who's successful, all of them are very good communicators in every form of digital media. Personalized learning is really being raised to the level of an expectation, and we don't really know how to deliver it yet at all. I mean, we're still looking at that. Everyone's talking about it, but we don't have any answers. And we need to, particularly in the sciences, we need to find ways to allow experiments to be shared and more collaboration while research is taking place, not only in the professional sense, but research in the student sense, in student experiments and student labs and sort of things. There's some very good work being done with remote labs, but they're one-offs. They're individual institutions doing something, and they're not really able to share the way that people would like to see. And then finally, and this is a very important challenge, is that the way to assess and evaluate all of this eludes us right now, and not only in teaching and learning, but in our own scholarship, in our own research, in our own work as scientists, as researchers and technologists, engineers, and so forth. So those are important contexts. In the report, we compare our findings with some recent findings in 2 other areas. As I said, the Ibero-American report, the new one, is being released next week, and it also identified 12 technologies, and that's in the left column. The STEM report is in the middle column, and then in January, the global report, the Horizon report, was published as well. And we wanted to show you the similarities and the differences. So all three noted that mobile apps and cloud computing were very important. There's differences in where open content plays out, where games play out. I thought it was very interesting that game-based learning has appeared both in the Global Higher Education Report and in Ibero-America, and in fact in K-12 as well. And it almost made the cut for this report, but it just missed the cut. So if we had a 15 list, it would be on it, but it's not as well. And the presence of books in the Ibero-American report, it's seen as something more distant, 4 to 5 years away, much closer here. And as I said, Sam will talk more about that. And in fact, let's let her do that. So Sam is going to walk through the various technologies that we've identified in the report. Now, what I wanted to point out is the format of the report is designed. If you just look at any page in the middle, you'll see that this is social networking, for example. It's all on one page. And this is designed so you can Xerox this and use it as a handout. This is a remixable Creative Commons report. So it can be freely duplicated. You can take excerpts. All we ask is that you credit the authors of the report, and you can use it any way you want. But we provide a very carefully thought through definition of the technology itself in a paragraph, why it's relevant to STEM teaching, a few examples of where it's being used in practice. We think it's very important to note that all of these technologies actually are real and people are working on them, and there are examples that you can look at. And then a section about further reading for if you want to do it. Now, one last comment before I pass it over to Samantha. The report itself is not written for educational technologists. Pardon me. It's too basic for the typical education technologist. They're going to be more interested in the list on the wiki that has the 60 to 80 technologies in there. This is written for administrators, decision makers, politicians, and people that we need to understand a particular technology. That's why it's written in a brief form that it is. So, with no further ado, let me introduce again Samantha Becker, who is the lead author and manages the background research for the project. And so take it away, Sam. Sam's going to highlight a few of the technologies. We don't have a lot of time, but so we won't go through all 12, but we're going to highlight a handful.
Thanks for that introduction, Larry. It was a great honor to be involved in this project with UNED, CSEV, and IEEE, so thank you so much for having me. As Larry mentioned, there's 12 technologies to watch in the report. We're going to focus on 3 right now, just for the sake of time, but I definitely encourage you to read the overviews and read the whole report when you get a chance. Okay, so the first technology we're going to discuss falls into the 1 year or less category, which means that the advisory board agreed that that technology was pretty imminent in terms of widespread adoption. That technology topic is social networking. So what does that mean? It means a lot of things, but primarily social networking is a means of informal communication. Can take place on normally open and public platforms such as Facebook or Twitter, and it really compels people to share real-time information, thoughts and feelings, as well as rich media and other content. Something important to note, within the past many years of the Horizon Project, social networking has been a distinct category from social media. Social media was seen, in the past couple of years as really all about the content, the video, for example, whereas social networking was all about communication. Well, this is the very last Horizon report where there are going to be separate topics. there's been definitely an evolution where social networking and social media have converged, and the communication is the content. So just to give you an idea of this evolution, Facebook has currently surpassed 9 million users. 900 million users, excuse me, thank you, 9 million, yeah. That is a huge country. And what is especially intriguing about that is it's not just, teenagers on Facebook or college students or professors. It's everyone. It's completely ageless and it's completely pervasive. I don't, when I have something exciting to share, the first thing I think about is not calling someone on the phone. I think about sharing with the community, that the NMC is built on the NMC Facebook page, for example. Now, what are the implications, though, for STEM education? Well, our sentiment is that social networking has not yet been completely leveraged in STEM education. It's completely pervasive in general society. I mean, everyone uses it, and it's a form of discovery and informal learning. But we're really just beginning to see it take root in STEM education. One example that we've listed in the report that we have here is a partnership between Duke University and Murdoch University in Australia. They've created a social map where students are actually sharing observations on dolphin populations and ecosystems of northwestern Australia, and are building a database and a map, a visualization of the changes that are taking place. So social media really does have the potential to be a really great way to share that sort of information. So in the next time to adoption frame, 2 to 3 years out, we have massively open online courses. Now that topic really, at this time last year, wasn't even being uttered. It wasn't as pervasive in conversations as it is today. And what we've discovered as it's gained traction is it means different things to different people. So the best way that we can define massively open online courses is to really break down the term, because MOOCs is kind of a strange word. So we have massively. What that really means is scale, right? It's a course, that scales to thousands and even millions of people. Open, that's a tricky word. To some institutions, open means free. To others, it's simply a set of open educational resources. Online, it's where all the action and learning takes place. And then courses, which is interesting in of itself because courses really, you think sort of getting credits for school, for university, but really with massively open online courses, it's not so much about getting credits. A pretty popular example at this point is Coursera, which was launched by 2 Stanford University professors, and it offers free online classes. In the works, they have a calibrated peer review system. So as MOOCs begin to take hold, there's lots of talk about how it's going to scale, how people are going to assess, concept mastery and things along those lines. For Coursera, for example, is really about video. It's all about watching videos from world-renowned professors on really specialized topics, and after you watch the video, then coming back together as a large group and discussing, the impact and what you've learned. Whereas possibly with other MOOCs, it could be more about interaction and peer-to-peer learning. So MOOCs are still in the research phase. I was really excited to hear about UNEC's CSEV and UNED's MOOC platform, which really does seem to emphasize interaction, and that's extremely exciting because that's such an important component of MOOCs, as really they have the ability to become a self-sustaining ecosystem, right? So the more content that learners put in, the bigger and more evolved the MOOC becomes. And finally, on the far horizon, but definitely still foreseeable, we have collective intelligence. So collective intelligence has been a term that's been in existence for a while, but really the way we've whittled it down to make sense to us has been tacit and explicit collective intelligence. There's two forms. So in general, collective intelligence refers to embedded knowledge within a large society or group. And probably one of the popular, the most common form we see right now are explicit collective intelligence. Probably the best example that comes to mind is Wikipedia, right? So it's a bunch of experts contributing to a public resource with different types of curated information on a wide range of subjects. Now, what may be potentially more interesting to in STEM education is tacit collective intelligence, which really is more about data mining and finding patterns, right? So, when I was thinking about different examples to share with you about tacit collective intelligence, I was chatting with Larry at lunch today, and he brought up what I think is a wonderful example. He has a friend who actually uses the social media, everything's full circle, the social media site Flickr, to track, was it ostrich? Cockatoo, the patterns of cockatoos. So he created a software that actually searches for tags and other data and finds these images on Flickr of cockatoos in various locations, pulls out the geocodes, and puts together a map of the different patterns of where the cockatoos are and what's happening with them. So that's a great example of collective intelligence. And where it becomes really useful down the line, 4 to 5 years out, is that we have the ability to use the patterns that we find to actually better the search results that return when we search for a subject, or even, in the marketing world, better customized advertisements. Collective intelligence, much like MOOCs, is really exciting because you're able to share your research with a network of people and also instantly update it, in the platform where it's taken place. So that's all about those technologies. Again, I definitely encourage you to read the full report, and we'd love to hear what you think about it on Twitter and on Facebook, which Larry will be getting to in a bit. And at this time, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Larry.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
So what we want to do at this point is invite you to be part of our work as well, and there's a number of ways that you can participate, and we hope that you do. We would love for you to help us to find articles, especially articles and research in Spanish. And all you need to do is to, if you tweet, put out a tweet with the NMCHZ hashtag in it, and we will see it. Because we follow that hashtag all the time. Sam is never not watching that. And
I'm tweeting right now.
Well, she would be if she reached over to my phone. She borrowed my phone to tweet while we were presenting. Or if you use Delicious, you can tag them in there. But we have a community of several thousand people that help us to find interesting articles and research. And it's this simple. You just simply tag it with NMCHZ, and we'll see it. We'd love for you to comment on the report. We'd love for you to blog about it. We'd love for you to tweet about it. We'd love for you to share it in your classes with your students. We'd love for you to send it to your colleagues. We'd like for you to talk about it on Facebook. If you see ways that we can improve it, we'd love to have that. It's a project that gets better every time we do it, but we know it's not perfect. It's as good as we can do it each time we do it, but we hope that each time we do it again, it becomes a little better, and it will be with your help. If you would like to be in part of our expert group, we would like to know that. And so we have a process for that where you can self-nominate, and you go to go.nmc.org/horizon-nominate and enter in your contact information, and when we form a new advisory board, we'll know that you're interested. And as I said, we do 6 or 7 Horizon research cycles every year, and Some are focused on specific regions, some are the global. You know, you'll have a chance to indicate which of those you might be interested in, and just let us know. And eventually you will get in, because we pay close attention to that. And then finally, a big part of our research, and one of the things that is really important, is that we highlight exciting new projects in emerging technologies. And we're always looking for these. And if you have one, we'd like to know. And we have a form, go.nmc.org/projects, or send a tweet out with the URL to your project and NMC HZ, that's the magic tag, and we'll see that as well. And you may very well see your project featured in an upcoming Horizon report. So with that, Manuel, I think we're ready for questions.
Yes. Can we take the microphone? Some questions here?
Perfect. 1 minute early.
Hello, I have a question about the community intelligence. You talk about 3-4 years to insert in the community intelligence. You speak about wiki resident, I see. I have a question. Wikipedia, for example, have a lot of articles, but these articles sometimes have very politicians questions and are reviewed and rewriting constantly, day by day. For example, other countries like China, for example, have censorship in the communication of the information. What do you think about these problems to achieve in 3-4 years to take the community intelligence?
Well, remember what we mean by that, and it's actually in the 4 to 5 year category, so it's a little further out than that. But what these categories are these are when we begin to see it being widely used in STEM education. So however you feel about it, you know, whether you feel like it's already here, or that that it's unevenly distributed, as William Gibson would have said, what our group of experts felt was that within 4 to 5 years, we'll begin seeing science courses, engineering courses, and mathematics courses making use of collective intelligence in interesting ways. The models that we have today, I think, are both fascinating and imperfect, and Wikipedia is a great example. I love to watch Wikipedia when there's news coming out, you know, because it changes almost minute by minute as people go in, and there'll be, you know, 1,000 people editing the story at once, and it will move and if somebody puts in a particular political viewpoint, for example, it may be erased in 30 seconds, you know, as somebody tries to make it be more objective, and it's self-correcting. That's the interesting thing, I think, about that form of collective intelligence. And the Horizon Project is a form of collective intelligence, a small example, but I think a good one for our community of scholars, of how we might use the intelligence embedded in a group of experts to do things. What's even more interesting to me, though, is the kind of collective intelligence that companies like Google and even Facebook are exploring by the patterns of uses of the internet. And yeah, I can see some hands coming up here. People are ones that come in on that. So I'll stop there.
First one is Miguel.
Hello. You have mentioned that massive involvement had created wonderful things like Wikipedia, for example. And I am thinking that in education, we always talk about massive involvement from the side of students, but I don't see the massive involvement from the side of teachers, because maybe the model is not as studied or as used as. But where is peer-to-peer education here? Because I don't see, maybe I think that's an interesting thing to think about. where do you situate that? Close,
Yeah.
in time, or?
I think it appears in all three. In the near term, in collaborative environments like Google Apps and Google Docs and simple tools like that, even wikis, very, very basic collaboration tools are just becoming more common in all sorts of courses. And they're easy to use. They don't have a steep learning curve, and we see them happening there. In the midterm, very much a part of the discussion of MOOCs includes exactly what you're talking about, peer-to-peer learning. And then I think further out, the collective intelligence topic also touches on that. So I think that there is a lot of activity out there, and I love the term. We may give some thought to seeing if we can't incorporate that terminology into the way we talk about it.
In the previous Horizon report, gaming and simulation was one of the key aspects. And here, it does not appear as one of the relevant technologies. And I think that, I want to see what is your point about that, because I think it could be a very good contribution to MOOC. MOOCs has a very limited interaction with the students, and probably for some STEM topics. There are some works, like, for instance, the one done by Chris D. at Harvard, or some other that has demonstrated a different kind of learning. I think it has at least a great potential. It's also difficult to implement and also very costly. But it surprised me not to see remote laboratory as one of the things for STEM.
Well, I would say that among the organizers, both of those were surprises to us as well. We just report what we find from the experts. But I will tell you that both remote labs and gamification barely missed the list. They barely missed the list. So they're still very important. And the research out there is, I know they're slightly different.
Yeah, sorry. I will not consider gamification, because gamification, at least to my understanding, is very well implemented now in some of the MOOC system, or for instance, in the Khan Academy has been very well implemented. I think, at least in my impression, some of the interaction that can be done by the student is usually multiple questions or either programming. But for many other disciplines, such as physics, for instance,
or chemistry.
Maybe because my background is in physics. So, there could be some topics that will be difficult to, if you want to do in a remote mode, in a MOOC, fully MOOC mode, it will be a little bit difficult. So it's something that surprised me, because till now it's it's a wonderful thing happening, but for STEM specifically, then I'm missing this kind of move on to a more interactive way.
I can't explain why it didn't make the list. I can only tell you that it missed it barely. In the case of the game-related technologies, it literally was by 2 votes. So it could have easily, with another advisory board, made the list. And we have to report what we know. This is the first time we've done the STEM report, and it usually takes a couple of 2 to 3 years to really get the advisory boards kind of really focused and more having a higher level of reliability and validity to the results. But I think that if you interpret the results for STEM in the context of the larger Horizon research, where games are very, very strongly represented, that it makes sense. The remote labs, I think that the reason why that didn't make the list is not because they're not important or useful, but because they're well understood already. They're not really an emerging technology. They're really, although it would be nice to have them more established, they're well understood. I think that was the reason for that.
Hi, my name is Emilio Lorenzo. I'm working at UNED, and I would like to know your opinion about the classic e-learning topics like learning object, LMS, all these things. What is the future of all these topics in this universe of new technologies, new features, new devices?
Well, I'm going to break those into two parts. LMSs are like remote labs, but even more so. Very well established. I don't know of any university that's not doing something with an LMS. It couldn't be more mainstream. So it's not in the set of things that we would typically look at because it's already here. Now, you could argue, oh, but there's a lot of interesting things, new things happening, and I don't dispute that, but it just hasn't been foregrounded as something that is as new as some of these other topics. So I think that it's just important to recognize that we feel that LMSs are not only important but pretty common. Learning objects is a different thing. We spent a lot of time in the beginning of the Horizon project studying learning objects. And the reality is that learning objects have just not caught on in more than 10 years of looking at them. They have a community that is very focused on them, but getting them into the mainstream has proven to be very, very difficult. I know that there's a lot of, well, in the military, they're very common and very, very much used. But getting them into traditional higher education has proved to be very, very difficult. We're not good at sharing. We're not good at agreeing on what the metadata should be. You know, there's just a lot of challenges related to them. There are new efforts underway with learning objects that may solve some of those problems, and they may come back. I'll give you another example of a technology we looked at 10 years ago and then moved away from, and now it's coming back, and it's actually on our list again, and that's 3D printing. We first highlighted 3D printing in 2004, and it did not make the mainstream, and it still hasn't, although with the MakerBot, I'm thinking about buying one actually myself. It's getting to the point where you could actually have a 3D printer in your home. So sometimes the problem is that we notice it too soon, and it needs, a lot more work before it's really ready for the mainstream. And perhaps learning objects are in that category.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, congratulations for an impressive report to all of you. It's amazing. We really look forward to being part of it in the forthcoming years. Just a very quick question. Regarding that diagram over there, it's curious to see that the Technology Outlook Latin America report seems to put augmented reality, learning analytics, MOOCs a little bit more into the future than the current one, the STEM one, that systematically puts those three like 2 or 3 years ahead in time. Do you think that is something actually related to the region, to the Latin American region itself, or it could be just related to the moment where the polls were implemented? Maybe if we...
Well, I think there's two dimensions, and the fact is that the Latin American report includes Peru and Bolivia and Uruguay, and countries that are doing some interesting things, particularly Uruguay with the Project CSEV, but they're not the same as Europe or North America. They just don't have the resources. But what I think puts these in the middle category for STEM is that this is where the work is happening. So augmented reality is a STEM-focused set of topics. To create augmented reality, to expand what you can do with augmented reality is very much a scientific and engineering endeavor. Learning analytics, in many ways, is a informatics challenge. And so I think that it resides very much in the STEM disciplines as well. And MOOCs, I think, Part of this is a reflection of the fact that the Latin American report was done, the research was done 2 months ago, and the STEM research was just done a few weeks ago, and that quickly MOOCs have, as I think of the Gartner hype curve, it's going straight up the hype curve right now, and we were talking about it at lunch. The only thing that we can compare it to in how fast people are turning attention to it is Second Life had the same pattern. So I'm hoping that it actually avoids the other side of the hype curve, and that it has more of a flat experience. But interesting.
I have a last question for the internet people. One question is if it's possible that the cloud computer more or less is going through, that is one of the most emerging technologies to be used here, if the MOOCs could be the next step to try to build education in the cloud computing. So it's a way to externalize all the parts you could have with the teacher in everywhere, with a lot of students everywhere, as Miguel said before. You could have many teachers from anywhere. So the way that the cloud computing should be the highway to implement this kind of completely external courses there.
I think that's an excellent point, and congratulations to the person that raised the observation. I think it's right on track. Cloud computing is getting to be a very complicated area, and we were thinking that we may need to break it into several groups. There's private clouds, there's hybrid clouds, there's virtual computing, creating virtual servers in that kind of capacity. There's storage, which is a whole other thing, which has become incredibly cheap. But for learning, I think that thinking about MOOCs in that context will be very illuminating. So I agree.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you to all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We go then to the next presentation. Thank you very much. La siguiente presentación que tenemos.